Currently at the moment I'm doing mostly portraiture work and a little bit of sort of conceptual artwork. That's what I call it, conceptual art anyways, working that way. Used to do a lot more street photography than I do now, but and I'd like to get back to that as well, of course. Just as I planned, just as I planned. I don't think I have a style as such. I look at other people's work like Ian Rankin or many photographers and look at what they're doing. Yeah, look gorgeous. Here I am doing something amazing.
Yeah, look at me.
I thought if I try to put a baffle on this thing would be flying all over with the wind.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying with a light without the baffle, hoping it's so bright that that's in itself is going to compensate for the direct flash. Does that make sense? So my style is really a mix of everything else that other people are doing, I suppose. Sadly but true, it's like about 5 years ago, my wife decided to buy me a camera, and she said it's the worst thing that she ever did. Since then, I've now got about 5 or 6 cameras and half a dozen lenses and lights, and the more I get into photography, the more I just want to do more and more of it. So, yeah, 5 years of just like mental spending money and taking photos, really. What is a good landscape photographer? What's a good portrait photographer? What's a good street photographer? They all have different skills, and so it's very hard for me to say, just as one person, to say a good photographer is this, that, or the other. I suppose the one thing I'm trying to think that joins all of these people together is actually understanding what they're trying to shoot and going after, having a vision. You know, I once read a long time ago that if you want to spend money on photography, is go out and buy other photographers' books. And I think that when you actually look at other photographers, you suddenly get inspiration or go, I really like that idea. I think I could do that idea. Also Instagram to a lesser degree. I love flipping through Instagram. And just there's so many great photographers out there. I could take 6 or 8 weeks sometimes to do one shoot. Because if I get a certain idea, I'll start researching for images on the internet, and sort of similar images to see what other people are doing. Then I'm going to have to think about styling. This is where I involve myself with the model and start saying, well, you know, have you got any clothing like this? Or we even go do a bit of shopping online together, and then you have to wait for those clothes to turn up. And sometimes I have a pre-meet to try out the clothing, to try out the makeup, to try out the props, to see what works and what's not working. So by the time you found your location, it could be, as I say, 6 or 8 weeks down the track from the initial idea to get a good photo. It's not like you just go out with your camera and take a shot. It takes planning. One of the things about photography, when you're an amateur like this, you have to learn to be the dresser and the stylist and have to understand clothing. This is not what I got into photography for. Okay, what I'm looking at doing today in this photo shoot is to get Melissa in some nice floaty dresses and put her out to sea. And I've never actually tried to shoot a model in the water before, so that should be fun. But also want to try and get some ideas about coming on shore, coming into the landscape. So I brought an old suitcase along to see if I can get Melissa emerging out of the water onto the land. I've got some other props as well, which might be fun, like if we get a chance, maybe some smoke bombs and that to sort of like, you know. No, the seaside's a really great place for photography, because if you look at somebody like Martin Parr, he's very famous for his street photography. Most of his work is actually seaside resorts around England, and some cracking stuff. I find that the first time I shoot with somebody, it's always a little bit awkward anyway. It doesn't matter who I'm shooting with. But I always persevere and say, look, let's just go for a shoot and try a few things out. And then I get to know them through the first shoot. I often find that the second shoot is better, because we're now starting to have a bit of a dialogue, a bit of understanding. And often what I like to do is show them pictures of other people's work, so saying, this is what I'm trying to create, and this is what sort of things I would like you to try and do. So they have a better understanding of what's going on. I think when you're doing this type of sort of model work or glamour work or portraiture work, you want people to know what they're supposed to do. And I think that's the big criticism I get from about other photographers, is that they don't communicate with their models very well.
Yeah. It's like sex, really. The first shag is never that brilliant, because you do have to know how the other works and what the other wants from each other. It gets better as you go along.
To move this, that's sand.
Oh, okay. I rather like that. Oh, I like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I always like me lying down, actually.
It's worth getting a good model. It's worth trying to find somebody who can do the job for you. It's a job, you know. It's not just about standing there and looking glam. There's a bit more to it. So, you know, you need somebody who's going to be self-confident. In the winter, though you can get some great location shots in the winter, you really are at the mercy of the weather. And so it's good to actually have some studio time booked during the winter, so you can actually try out some of those indoor ideas, maybe bring in other people to help you, like stylists, makeup artists, and really go the whole town in the studio. Out here in the summer in the locations, it's a little bit more sort of make it up as you go along. And as you just saw today, we picked out some locations here and just work with them, just had some fun.
Okay, it's really bendy. So basically, someone that worked for my old agency, I was still in contact with her, and then she recommended me for a shoot for Africa Day, and then that's when I met Colette, where she did the photography for that day, and the shoots came out amazing, and it was used in a magazine. This was like some of the shots from that day. There's that one. And this was like the main.
Right.
But yeah, hopefully many more come out as good as this. What we're looking forward to today. And there's someone film as well here.
So I usually do a lot of like music shoots, fashion, portraiture, that kind of thing. Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, the eyes closed look really nice, and then if you could just lower the arm down, let's see what that looks like. Maybe just on the leg kind of thing.
I would define my style as like quite raw in a way, because I shoot a lot on analog and film cameras, so it's got that kind of like grain to it, I guess, not as like kind of clean as a lot of digital photographers. And I guess I use a lot of colour as well in my work, in terms of lighting and then backgrounds and styling and makeup. So yeah, I'd say my style is quite colourful and like more kind of poppy editorial style, rather than like kind of just like headshots or just one kind of genre, I think, yeah. What? Head's turning a little bit to me. Yeah, that's perfect. And looking at the camera, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Nice. Recently I've been using my mirror, so yeah, so the themes in my work are kind of a lot about like self-reflection, and things like that. So yeah, I love to use mirrors with myself or with my models or musicians, because I like that kind of like two people there, but it's the same person kind of thing. Yeah, so I guess themes of my work, self-reflection. That's perfect. Yeah, and then you do the arm thing. That was really nice. Nice. So today's shoot, I did a lot of research into kind of different styling options and different makeup that all kind of felt kind of, I guess, like otherworldly in a way. So we had some like big puffy kind of outfits, pink, and then like the galaxy makeup that Poppy did. So yeah, it's all like quite otherworldly, and then the lighting as well. I kind of used a gobo with like a kind of insert that creates a blind effect. But I think the themes in today's shoot were kind of like dancey, kind of like cherub-like, really soft, and stuff like that. But usually I do plan my shoots like quite thoroughly with like sketching and stuff like that. But then on the day, like that kind of all goes out the window, and then you just do what you feel like in that moment. With photography, it's very much like, I don't know, you're there and the setting's completely changed in your head or how it looks on the screen. So you just got to work with like what you've got that day. That's kind of how I plan my shoots, usually sketching, so research, sketching, and then reaching out to stylists, MUAs, models, and then doing the shoot and kind of seeing what happens more like spontaneously. I prefer it that way, so yeah.
That looks way cleaner though.
I don't really know. I'll just message her.
Yeah. Or take a photo of it and be like, look, does this look like from here or something?
A few years ago, I was very much into shooting intuitively, doing a lot of street photography, anything that I was doing as a landscape. You know, I'm not a patient photographer, so I've never been the person who wakes up at 4 a.m. and, you know, sits in the same location for hours waiting for something to happen. I'm the type of photographer who goes and finds something anywhere. Because I believe that we connect to a place and a time very differently as individuals. So I like to find what connection I have with the place, with the people inhabiting it. I'm very much drawn to minimalist images because I think it's quite hard to look at the scenery or, you know, have a theme in your mind and shoot to it and try to discern exactly how to distill the message, how to convey exactly that emotion that goes through your whole, you know, body and mind and soul at the time.
In terms of themes, I'm very drawn to shooting liminal spaces, both physical and mental, the areas that we travel throughout our lives or physically to get from one place to another. So the often overlooked things, you know, the everyday, the almost mundane, quite drawn to that. I'm into themes surrounding memory and phototherapy. I like the notion of the benefit of taking a photograph. Sometimes the benefit is more important than the photograph itself. Like everybody, when I look at the world, it's in colour. Photography does give you the option to look at the world in black and white, which is quite interesting and quite intriguing. So, you know, I did take it upon myself to push myself with the work, especially on this project, and I made some deliberate and conscious choices to shoot this project in bulk in black and white. However, there are colour images, but again, going back to my style, I like to think of myself as considered and deliberate. I might photograph something abstract because I'm trying to communicate a more abstract concept, and then other photographs will be very formal and symmetric, and then sometimes I might push that slightly to one side because I'm trying to make the viewer feel more uncomfortable. Commercial photography is very different because you're shooting for a client, you're shooting to a brief. The client has ideas and expectations. So a lot of the time I think I'm a good fit because my work, as I said, is usually very considered and very deliberate. So if I'm shooting for the client, I want to know what the client's about, where their tastes lie, what their aspirations and how they're trying to communicate their product, and then hopefully we can translate that into visual language and deliver a top-class, elegant shot for the client.
And I'm shooting about 3/4 length. So I'm going to have to brighten that up. That's coming in quite dim at the moment, so I'll brighten that up. So in terms of preparation for shoots, some can be ad hoc, and some of those are some of the best ones where you get the most unexpected results. But a lot of the shoots, particularly if I travel, let's say to Iceland, I've organised a tour, for instance, with a number of photographers and some models, that takes an awful lot of preparation and many months of preparation, not just in terms of the logistics of the travel and the transport when we're there and the accommodation, etc., but in terms of trying to scout locations. And because you can't just pop over at the weekend and scout those locations, a lot of that you have to do on, say, Google Maps, and zooming in on the satellite areas, trying to think, right, if we shoot from here, we've got that waterfall in the background, we've got the light coming from this direction. So trying to get as many of those type of ideas such that you can hit the ground running when you arrive there. You've got some basic ideas. Of course, any plans that you make change as soon as you get there. But if you've got some ideas, then you've got something you can build on. What we're going to do today, I'm going to use, this is your main light, got it gridded to give it that kind of old Hollywood type of look. I've got that hair light on you, picking your hair out, and I've got that spot on the background here. So I'm going to want you a little bit away from the background, so we've got some separation about there. That's coming down you, and I've got a little bit of reflection coming on the back. So I'm going to take some test shots and to see what that lighting's looking like, and I might need to adjust that. Okay? Working with Helen's fantastic, but I think when we work together, a lot of the images would be classed as outtakes. I think there's a lot of larking about that happens. But then, we get down to the more serious photography and get some fantastic images. Lighting. And there's lighting up here. So some people have nice automated lights. These are manual, but you can reach them quite easily. Okay. Okay, looking good. Just an easy sequence of poses. Again, they're all going to be 3/4 at this stage. Looking nice. That's nice. Okay, that's great. That's lovely.
The photography workshops are aimed at beginners and intermediates, anybody really that would like to get a bit more confidence working with a model. Perhaps they haven't got the confidence to work one-on-one yet. So we organise little workshops, probably 4 to 6 photographers.
Yeah. So for the workshops, they're generally aimed at the more beginner or intermediate level photographers. They're really wanting to learn how to use a studio and use the lighting. And we've got a fairly flexible set of lighting here, so we can show people how to do things with single lights, multiple lights, up to 5 lights, and then maybe bring in different styles of bodyscapes or portrait or whatever, and also bring in techniques using gels and using smoke and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to want that so it's not putting too much shadow on your face. So so I'm going to want you looking kind of up into that. In fact, what I'm going to do, we get a lot of people wanting to come back again, repeat
More
things.
punishment.
Yeah, they can be quite grueling at times, because you're working maybe late into the evening, and then you might have some hours drive to get back, and then get up in the next morning, and it can be quite full on, particularly with the vagaries of the weather. Having to make last minute changes of plan when it starts. Rain in one area, you have to drive somewhere else. But there's so much to see there. I think everybody really loves it. I don't think so. Cool. That's nice. That's good.
I would say book a really experienced model who for your first shoot, who knows what they're doing, and then develop from there.
Yeah. There's a lot that a photographer can learn from an experienced model. And I think any photographers wanting to get into model photography would be well advised to actually spend some money, book a successful or well experienced model in a studio, and really get to learn how to interact with a model, to talk to them, and also to take feedback from the models. And they'll learn a lot more quickly than just trying to experiment on their own. Okay, that's nice. So let's leave that there for now. And yeah, a lot of it is about confidence. And you find actually a lot of the photographers who are into that kind of model photography are really there for not just collecting great photographs, but it's that whole social interaction. It's a social scene as well as a photography art. Yeah, looking great. Some of those will edit up really nicely. A bit of red behind you.
Love it. What
Good.
next, Mr. Nicol?
I'd say we had a psychological relationship. You're the psycho and I'm logical.
Yes. And together, I bring all the bricks, and you bring the cement, slather it on, and then we organise crazy
things
events.
happen. Yeah, things happen when we work together.
How I got started in photography, if you want to think about right at the very beginning, I was a young teenager, I was a teenager, and a friend of mine, he'd bought a camera and he was doing his own developing and doing his own photography. And we ended up sharing a flat together, so I got very interested in what he was doing, and so he taught me how to do darkroom developing. We had the enlargers and everything like that, so it was all black and white. But we started off very, and this is in the 80s, so it was sort of, photography was not well known, and so we felt like mavericks because we were doing something that nobody else was doing. It was great fun, really enjoyed that, yeah. I moved to this country from Australia 30 odd years ago, and eventually about 20 odd years ago I moved to Whitstable. This is where we are now. I've been living here and doing all sorts of work, but I've ended up doing HR and then working in employment law, which has been very lucky for me because I work a 4-day week as a consultant, which gives me 3 days a week where I can actually concentrate on more of my photography work. I find that the more work I do, there's more projects start coming my way. And I think with anything you do in life, the more you do it, the better you get. The better you get, the more it starts coming your way. I think with photography, there are so many different levels you can work at in terms of whether you're just a sort of a weekend photographer, or whether you want to sort of pursue it as more of a sort of a very keen interest, right the way to becoming a professional photographer. I would really like to be able to create work that I'm proud of, project work that I would be happy to be able to put into an exhibition. And one of my ambitions is to actually have my own my own individual exhibition. There's a great art gallery down here called the Horse Bridge. I exhibit now locally with other photographers, but I think it would be just great to be able to have my own show where I can say, this is my work. Come on, world, come and see my work, So that's something I'd really like to do shortly, I think putting on an exhibition is a long-term project for anybody because first off, you've got to find the venue. I think one of the troubles about being a photographer, you're trying to get your work out there without talking about the internet, is finding a place that's available. I know that in this area there's only 1 or 2 really public spaces that you can actually rent, and I actually think it would be so much nicer if a lot of the councils actually had more space where not just photographers but artists and all sorts of people could actually take their their art, their objects, whatever, and be able to put them into the public arena. I think you're right there in terms of the way that the internet has had an influence on photography. I think with places like Instagram and Facebook and Flickr and all the different apps that you've got in terms of photography, it actually does widen up that access for people to go on there and put their photography. I think this sort of generates itself too, because some people put some very good photography on some of these internet spaces, and you see them, you get inspired, and so you start putting your stuff on there as well. So I think a lot of people think that they're photographers, and there's nothing wrong with that thought. But I think there are people who have cameras, and then I think there are photographers, and I think they're 2 different types of people. I think with iPhones, I think there's some very good photographers out there who are now using iPhones as their primary mechanism of creating images for their work. And you've got things like Snapseed, which is a processing app you can put on your phones, and I know that professional photographers are now using that. I've heard of exhibitions which are relying purely on iPhone photography, so I know that's happening. But does having an iPhone make you a photographer? Interesting question. I think first off, there are a lot of rules that the photography or any art has in terms of composition, in terms of lighting, in terms of narrative, in terms of presentation and so forth. But I think a lot of people are not even aware of that, and they're not even that interested to go and find out. They take a photo, they think it looks good, and for all intents and purposes, if a person likes the photo, then it's a good photo for that person. But how do you define good photography? What really attracts me to photography is the idea that I can communicate ideas that I've got in a different format, in a different medium, as opposed to just talking to people. And I've given you some of the photos as examples. For instance, the one of me when I had cancer in that dark period. It's a dark photo. And I think that emotional side of photography is important because I think it communicates better than just me saying, I'm not in a good place mentally. I think that photo actually demonstrates that. I think people recognize that. I think, to me, a really good photo, and I think every now and again I do get a photo that communicates, that has what I call narrative, or many people call narrative. I'd like to have my photography to be able to tell stories, for people to look at it and have some sort of understanding of where I was coming from when I take that photo.
So I've been doing photography since I was about I guess 15, so like GCSEs. That's when I kind of saw it as an option, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. Don't really know anything about it, but just thought, yeah, it looks cool. Another medium, because I've always been interested in art, and all sculpture, painting, mixed media. So I was like, yeah, photography is just another kind of way of showing ideas. And then I studied graphic design and for 3 years, and then worked as a graphic designer, and then realised that photography is my passion and that's what I want to do. So then just thought I really need a crash course in lighting. So I did a diploma at LCC, and now, yeah, here I am. So when I graduated from LCC from my diploma, I exhibited with Rankin at his studios with some other graduates, and that was a photography exhibition in this big cove kind of thing, set up my work, and that was really fun, and a really good experience to do that. And then, yeah, I've been published in quite a few magazines. So Vogue Italia has, Vogue Italia has picked up some of my work, just submitting it to them, and then they put it on their website. And then through a lot of musicians, their work gets publicised in other magazines. So Notion has been one. I've also done stuff for H&M, so they had like a live style studio in their Regent Street opening store, so that was really fun. Yeah, I've done stuff for Calvin Klein fragrances with Cinderella and Matthias, and yeah, that was really fun. So we went to Botany Bay Beach and I took my film camera and we did some stuff with the perfume, and then like kind of a love story about them with the beach and the sand, and like, yeah, it was a really, really cool shoot.
I saw a presentation once on becoming an artist later in life, and that particular artist was saying that you need life experience to put into your work to make it more effective and to communicate better. And since doing the MA, I've certainly found that to be true.
We're both self-taught photographers who come from a different career, so we've not always done photography all our lives other than as a hobby. And I thought the MA brought a completely different approach and vision and attitude towards how to photograph, what to photograph, and how to show it to the world. Which brings me to the point, you know, the last module of the MAs was all about how to present your work, how to, you know, show it, how to share it. And we were encouraged to think about ways of sharing it, you know, where to share it. And it was just a really good opportunity that we are based in Whitstable in Kent. We have an amazing art gallery here, which is the Horsebridge Art Centre. They put together a lot of exhibitions and other events throughout the year, which is really good. And we just had the opportunity to have our space in Gallery 1, which is where we are at the moment, to exhibit the work that we've done for the MA. Matt's chosen to show his final major project. I'm also showing my final major project for the MA, but also another project that I did previous to that, which is very related.
I specialise in various areas of photography. I think my most recent foray has been into astrophotography. That's something that I got into really a few years ago when the Neowise comet went past, and I managed to get some images of that with my normal camera. And they came out relatively good. I was quite pleased with those, and that inspired me to go deeper into it. So I did a few things with my normal camera, and then dived in and got myself a telescope and a proper astro camera, cooled astro camera, with all of the software and things that go along with that to be able to capture those faint things up in the sky. And I've really been quite pleased with the outcome of that. It's really exceeded my expectations in what I've been able to pull out of those images. Started off in photography many, many years ago. I was really inspired, I suppose, by my father, who had a camera and used to take a lot of holiday snaps, I'd say. But he really inspired me to get into it, maybe from before I was 10. And I did the normal snaps and travel photography things. But I got very much interested in taking landscapes and really using landscapes as a good reason to go and explore the country, and not just to go for a walk, but to go and take some images that, to the best of my ability. The other areas I got into was model photography. This maybe 10 years, 9 or 10 years ago. And that has been something that uses different techniques. It's not just taking a static photograph of an image, but of a landscape, but it's getting a model to enhance that and to really get those two things working together. So it's a technical challenge, but a great artistic outcome. And that's what I like about all of the styles of photography I do, whether it's landscape, model photography, or astrophotography. It's that mix of technical challenge and artistic output. The type of style I try to attain is really to get an image that pleases me. So my style does change over time, and while there may be a lot of similarities, and because I'm using the same or similar techniques, I don't try to get that, one image absolutely looks like one of mine, it looks like another one. Some photographers really thrive on that. Mine's a bit more eclectic. Photography is something which you don't want to just stop and find one style and stick to it, unless you're particularly a commercial photographer, really focusing your business on that style, and people expect that style. This is really for me. I like the images that I like. I think the best thing about being a photographer is it changes the way you look at the world. You notice things that other people would just take for granted or not focus on at all. The way you look at a landscape or the sky or architecture, etc., changes when you're a photographer, because you're not just looking, oh, that's a pretty building. You're thinking, oh, look at the way the light's hitting that. If I waited another half an hour and I had my camera, then I could really capture a nice photo.
The first image that we want to talk about today, which I took several years ago, is an image of a young model who's in a fetal position in an anonymous area, surrounded by photographers. The focus is very much on her, and I think at the time what I had was, going back a few years ago, I was involved in camera clubs locally. And also other groups who would go out and do group shots, and often you would actually see, young models would be involved in this, often sort of like dressed in a certain way, and that they were almost an object that people would set up and take photographs of. So I like the idea that we were actually hunting. Because there's something sort of like a bit perverse about the relationship between the model and the photographer. Because when you've got a camera, it's like you've actually got a weapon. You're out there you're shooting, you're hunting. Whether you're doing street photography or anything else, you're out there and you're looking for something. You're looking for an image. I think this particular image is about trying to relate the relationship between photographers as almost being voyeurs. Or even being predatory, and that the model in this particular thing, in this image, demonstrates or is supposed to represent somebody who is, very vulnerable. I knew with this image, I had an image in my head that was not this image exactly. I knew the setup of actually having photographers, anonymous photographers, taking photo of somebody in a very vulnerable position. This came out when some people I knew were putting together a model night in a village hall, and I turned up and I said, yeah, I'd like to come along and take one or two photos with you guys. And they said yes. So I don't think at first anybody understood what I was doing, because I said, and in fact, I'm actually in this photo. I think of this as a self-portrait photo. So I said, why don't we all get together and we're going to put the model in this position and we're going to just spotlight her, and we're all going, and it was during COVID, so we all had COVID masks on, which made us even more anonymous. And it was really funny because I actually think this is quite not a flattering photograph of photographers. But they all just went, yeah, let's do that. And I said, great. So we set the whole thing up. I've actually tried to pick a whole different type of photos for this interview. And the second one I'm looking at now is one which was a studio shoot that we talked about for many months to get to this point. In fact, we'd actually did a previous shoot to this where I made the dress out of newspaper, and it was rubbish and it did not look good at all. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who's actually is a dress designer, and actually she makes clothing, and she's a textile artist, and a great lady. And she said, look, let me make you something. And she actually made this dress for us. I really like this because it also demonstrates collaboration with other people. And a lot of my photography, I used to do a lot of photography by myself, thinking that's what photographers do. But in fact, when you collaborate with other people with different skills, it could be makeup people, it could be stylists, it could be people who know lighting better than you do. And some of my best photos have been due to collaboration. It's sort of not my photo, it's our photo. So this particular image is an interesting image for me because there's many of my friends have said this should become more public. Without getting into too much about my own background, but I went through some very severe cancer about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And I was actually trying to actually deal with the whole idea of palliative care and, the end of your life and what does that all mean. And I was going through a lot of self-portrait photography, and I thought I would try and capture some of the emotions I was going through during that year of chemotherapy and radiotherapy operations and everything I went through. And I think this photo, more than any other photo, I think is an emotional photo for me because this is me trying to deal with the stuff that was going on. So, I hope that comes across with that, but that's a very personal photo. But I think using an NDF filter and having it up on a tripod and you just have that slow motion happening with people in particular, I find that quite an interesting effect. Right, this particular image, which is a bit of a late entry because it's a fairly recent photo, is of a poet that's from East Kent. She was actually brought up in Tunbridge Wells, but she has a Middle Eastern background. With this particular image, she's actually representing a poem that she wrote, which I quite like, because when we started talking over Instagram, I said, send me some of your poetry, I'd be interested to see what you got. This particular poem is called Glittery Princess, or something along that lines, where she's writing about herself as a young child going to parties and being from a Middle Eastern background and being not your sort of normal thin white princess. And she always felt slightly detached from the rest of the party. And I think it's one of my favourite portraits so far this year. For this final image, I thought I'd throw in a street photo because my original love of photography is through street photography. And that's what attracted me to the photography as a genre or as an art form in the first place. Because when I was young, I came across not just street photography, but the work of people like Diane Arbus, who did the black and white people on the street. And I still go to London. This photo was actually taken in Soho. And I was walking around looking for people, because I always like to shoot people. And this particular situation was I could see this group of people hanging around the streets of Soho, who obviously was some sort of group, I wouldn't say gang and so forth, but definitely a collection of interesting people. So I pulled out my camera and I started taking photos of them. I actually started walking towards them as I'm taking photos of them. You'll see in this image, there is one man on the right, the sort of where it says eats, the sort of the biggest man in the group. He looked at me and he actually told me to, he abused me, and as he was abusing me for taking his photo, all his friends turned around and looked at me as well. And to me, this is like when Cartier-Bresson says the decisive moment. This is where I've got all 5 strangers all staring at me in a malicious way, and I took this photo and then I ran.
Probably still my favourite image is one that I call Narcissus. And it's just, I like it because the light was made with like cardboard, like strapping cardboard over a light and then like cutting a hole in it. And I didn't really know what it would look like until I did it. And it kind of created like a snoot effect and kind of like focused in the light to this girl sitting down with a mirror. And yeah, it's just different really. And then the styling was really good. So I think like everything in the image just works. Like sometimes you get those images that you're like, yeah, like I know that's going to be a good image. But so the images the other week, they came out really well. I was really happy with them. And the colours were really bright and vibrant already because they were on film, so there's like a kind of like an added kind of quality to them already. But I did the S-curve of the highlights and the shadows, and then I went in and like made everything like even brighter than it was. And yeah, I was really happy with the result. I think yeah, it's always exciting to see when you take pictures on film. It's exciting to see the final result. And then there's a picture I took of her just kind of crouching like on this rug, my boyfriend's rug, and it's kind of just like she looks like a kind of creature in a forest type thing. And yeah, but I really like that image. I only used 2 lights, but people always ask me like how I lit it because I kind of did it. I'm not really sure how I did it anyway, but like I lit it so that it was kind of, the one light was towards the background and her, so it kind of created this gradient, and then I used like a side light coming from the back, and then a little bit of natural light as well because I shoot at a really low shutter speed because I use film, so kind of created this nice quality of light. But yeah, it kind of also shows that you don't need like loads of lights to create like a striking image. You can just use 2, but kind of angle them, use different modifiers, and then you can like create a really like strong image.
Yeah, so this image I would say is central to this project, which is called Tales from the Silk Factory. It talks about my experience as a child in Romania in the late 70s, early 80s, which not trying to go too much into historical events, but it was a period of profound crisis that we all went through before, you know, the fall of the Berlin Wall and all the changes that happened at the end of the 80s decade. I told this story to Matt a few years ago, that I remember from my school days that, you know, one day, as I think I must have been something like 8 or 9, we turned up at school in primary school, and we were told in assembly that our gym was going to be transformed into a silk production facility, which sounds completely bonkers, and it was. But that was the reality of my childhood at the time. You know, we were always asked, even as like very young children, from the age of 4 or 5, to participate in these, you know, patriotic labor tasks. And as I said, to an unassuming and unknowing spectator, it sounds completely bonkers, the things that we used to have to do. But for me, it became a symbol of that period, and it became the main symbol for this project. What you see there is a silk scarf falling onto the floor. And that obviously took a few tries, with Matt kindly helping me achieve this, because there was like just the right degree of timing of, you know, dropping the silk scarf and, you know, working the lighting out and everything else. I had a smoke machine in a corner as well, and that was again to provide kind of a natural sort of blurriness to the image. So the telephone is a good example of show me how old you are without telling me how old you are, because anyone sort of my generation will remember this was our only way of communicating when we were kids and teenagers. And I do remember that in the block of flats that we used to live with my family, my sister and my parents, we had a 2-bedroom flat, and the telephone was on the hallway. There was no privacy whatsoever. You know, if the phone rang, you had to stand on the hallway and speak on the phone with your friends, and, you know, dad in the background going, "Oi, you know, you're not telling your life story on the phone." So this is the other project that I'm showing at the exhibition, and I titled it The Fabric of Memory. It was a very experimental project for me, and this is actually what got me the MA. That was my final project that I submitted for the MA with Falmouth last year. It's very experimental because I moved away from digital camera, and I've shot on film. I don't normally shoot on film, so this was quite nerve-wracking to think about, you know, are the pictures gonna come out all right? Do I have enough time to reshoot? I started using 2 cameras that were in my family. So one was a very old Voigtlander that belonged to my grandfather, and the other one was a tiny Canon point and shoot that my sister bought me sometime in the 90s. I ended up shooting most of this on the little Canon, which in terms of technical difficulty, it was the easiest thing that a child could operate that. It literally had no settings whatsoever. So it's either you use the flash or you don't use the flash, and the flash is this little like pop-up thing. Using such a basic camera almost removed the you know, the need or the desire or the tendency to keep messing about with settings, which I think on digital cameras we do all the time. The juxtaposition of images, so in this case this collage, is just showing different angles, different points of view if you want, and then the fact that I've put that next to an archive image, which is pretty much taken in the same place, is to show the connection I have with my past, with my family, and especially with my mother, who's no longer with us, sadly. So it was all to connect the place, the surface, you know, the material of everything that I encountered in that place, with memories, with identity, with my family history. This is another composite where I've put together an archive image and a new image. And it was all prompted by me going back to Romania to photograph for this project. I have very few relatives left in Romania. My sister lives in England, my dad lives in England. My mum sadly passed away. But we still have my mum and dad's last flat in Bucharest. And when I went there, I wanted to go around the flat and take pictures of objects. And to my surprise, rummaging through some of my mum's drawers, I found this dress, which I probably hadn't seen at that point for about 40 years. And it instantly transported me back in my kindergarten years, and that's probably, you know, there must be one of the earliest memories I have as a child. You know, I must have been about 4 or 5 wearing this. So I found this dress, and then I wanted to photograph the dress. The whole process of taking these photographs was very driven by emotion, by intuition. There was nothing planned. The only thing that I planned was the places that I was going to go to.
Absolutely love this image. I think it's a great image to try and explain the project. And I think it needs to actually be viewed as part of the project. I think it makes more sense. All of this project is about communicating the life of an uncle that I never knew. So this opening image is about trying to chase a memory. And I posted it online. So obviously you're now viewing the image on its own, in isolation, in quite a small format, typically on a phone or something. I shot this image as part of the project, I did post it online, and a lot of people said it was a crap photo. And I find that quite an interesting response because, yes, it is blurred. It's out of focus, it's blurred. It's low contrast, and it's poorly composed, which is all the feedback that I got. And they're absolutely right. But it's done deliberately because I'm trying to chase a memory. So memories aren't clear focused, they're not high definition. They are fuzzy, they are low contrast, they're ethereal, they're something you can't get hold of. And as much as you try and get to that image, and I think in this setting, this is perfect because the further away you get from this image, it looks different. So if you walk away from it, it looks different. As you walk closer to it, it gets harder to make it out, it gets harder to see it. So if we stand back, the dark edges on the frame here are much darker, and then as we get, and the figure becomes clearer. But as we get closer to it, the dark edges fade away, the figure becomes more soft focus, the whole thing becomes more ethereal, and it becomes harder to actually grasp what the image is. So from that respect, that changing aspect of walking towards the image, I think actually highlights what the image is all about. So again, as part of this project, making some very deliberate choices, this image is in colour, and it stands out throughout the rest of the project as it is in colour, because that's the graveyard, and that is the graveyard as it is today. So, you know, there's a conscious choice about it being in colour, because it represents today, you know, the modern world. Again, you know, there's the foliage here is in sharp focus and the rest of the graveyard's blurred out, because I'm viewing this very emotionally. It's very difficult for me to actually focus on the gravestones. You know, my emotions were coming through on the day of the shoot, and the world was appearing quite blurry to me. Graves here, my uncle is buried there, but you wouldn't know it because there is no grave marker. So he is in fact anonymous in this graveyard, hence the lack of focus, the blurring, and you know, which grave is it? You know, that's what we're talking about here. These other images, again, you know, this is very formal, it's very deliberate. It's a self-portrait, because throughout my life, growing up, everybody has said I'm the spitting image of my uncle, so I use myself as a surrogate for him. And this very, very formal pose with the hard shadows to obscure and play with, is it me or is it him? So if we look at these three images, you know, the connection with the sea, with my uncle being part of the Navy. This image connects to parts of the Bible, Revelations, you know, the sea shall give up her dead. So there's a real naval connection there with what's going on in that image. And then here we're looking at perhaps macro shots of damage to a car. He died in a car crash. And you can see how visceral and violent the car crash was, and I think that comes across with these images. You know, they're dirty, they're not clean. There's energy, there's, you know, violence, and those things are connecting within those pictures. You know, I'm shooting, I'm in costume, pretending to be my uncle in that location. So the harsh sunlight on the day is throwing the shadow on the floor. I'm stood there, my assistant is taking the picture for me, under obviously direction. And I wanted to get this graphical splash to draw the viewer into a sense of foreboding, unknown. There's a path of light through the image. You get half an idea of that person being there, being present, casting a shadow. At first glance, this image might look like I can't make a panorama properly. It's an entire series of photographs shot in one go as a panorama, but I haven't stitched them together and blended them to make a seamless panorama like you typically would. There's a number of reasons for doing that, but again, as part of the project, this is speaking and connecting back to my uncle's life on a number of levels. As I mentioned, he was in the Navy, so amidst the hard work, sweat and toil of being on a ship for months, this, in contrast, is the calm, peaceful view that was ever present to him, you know? But again, like a lot of his life alluded to, it was broken up into sections of being home, being away, and also the pieces of the mystery surrounding his death don't fit together. So that's part of what this photograph is alluding to.
So this first image is one taken last year, actually on my honeymoon. It's a picture of Helen in a sort of bridal gear at an abbey we were staying at in Scotland. And it was a fantastic place to shoot this kind of image because it had, you know, great, almost Gothic-y architecture in the building and really nice light. So we really took advantage and spent an afternoon shooting around the place. And this one I particularly liked because of really the symmetry and the architecture, as well as Helen looking very radiant. So this image is from a very productive shoot from a couple of years ago out at Cotswold Lavender with the model Emma Jane, shooting in amongst the lavender and the fields of yellow flowers and other nice flowery areas there. Beautiful weather with just a mix of cloud and sun, which produced some really lovely lighting. I particularly like this one. It really brings out the enjoyment and the really summery feel there. It's holding the blue flower with the yellow and the lovely sky. And this next image is one we took about maybe 4 or 5 years ago in Bali. Helen and I were on a bit of a tour around the area. And this was a location, I think it was the Modak Mundung plantation. And it was a location I chose specifically to get this type of image. They have a infinity pool that's got the mountains in the background. And I thought, right, that's a good reason to go and stay there. So we set this one up and we took a couple of images, some the evening before, and then some this is quite early morning, really getting that light. So it's quite a long pool, so it's a 200mm lens, very close to the ground. So we get that real infinity look there, but you can still just bring out the mountains in the background. This next image is a shoot with the model Charlie. This was in Aldermaston, I believe, and it's a really nice natural light area in amongst the trees by a lake. And I think this one used a reflector to bring some light up into her eyes. But I think it was the first time I'd taken out a new Samsung 85mm f1.4, so I was really putting it through its paces. And this really worked for that, getting that shallow depth of field, getting some foliage in the front, very out of focus, and then the out of focus in the back, and it really just pulls out Charlie and shows it in a really good light there. Okay, so here's an image of Pippa on a black volcanic sand beach in southeastern Iceland with the mountain Vesterhorn in the background. It's a very dramatic area to shoot with very changeable weather. Like the day before this, we'd had 90-mile-an-hour winds, horizontal rain, and a bit of a washout. But this day, the weather was just perfect. Not a breath of wind, beautiful skies, really, really nice light. It's really a mix of location and the model. I liked just going somewhere and just taking a landscape is one thing, but putting a model in there is different. So you've got to get the balance of the two. So finding the right location and the right model in the right sort of poses, the right story that it's giving is all very, very important. Otherwise, it's not just going for a walk and looking at the scenery. This brings out the options to really look a lot deeper into that scenery and then enhance it with a model.
There are two types of photography I do like. One is street photography and the other one is portrait photography. Two completely different types of setups, completely different ways to go. So sometimes I go out in the street with a Canon 5D or the 7D, and I found it really big and really hard to work with. But I thought I had to have the big camera to get the good shots. I actually find that with street photography, I bought the Fuji X100 just to try something a little bit different. And I think for street photography, you want something that's small and compact, still like a good quality camera. If I could afford a Leica, hey, who wouldn't want to afford a Leica? But at the end of the day, something that's small is inobtrusive and you don't scare people when you're out in the streets firing away with something as small as this. Obviously, the less gear you've got on the streets, the quicker it is that you can run if you have to. Or you don't want it to be sort of like set up so where you become too obvious like a photographer and then people start pointing at you and you lose all the shots. I think with any sort of shooting that you do, whatever the genre is, you want to try and shoot in RAW if you can, and not use sort of like camera filters or anything like that, because you can do that in the post processing. So why would you play around within your camera? Being digital, I process in black and white for street photography. I just have that feeling that the street photography is a black and white medium. If I'm doing any portrait photography, that's where I will probably look at taking a number of lenses. I know that everybody talks about the nifty 50 on a Canon as being a sort of like a fairly good standard portrait lens. But it's standard. It's nothing particularly good. I've started using a lot more the 85mm on the 5D and standing a bit further back. I don't have any zoom lenses. Everything I have is primary lenses. It's a habit I got into when I first got into photography, where people were saying the primary lens is the better lens. There's some drawbacks to them, but I like the idea that I can get bigger apertures, simpler lenses. It's more about the image, not about how much I can get out of the zoom lens. I think with lighting that you've got to take in consideration the circumstances that you are. But if I'm trying to do a flattering photograph, I think you need to control your light. Light setups are very inexpensive these days. I buy everything from Amazon. You can get some stands, you can get some soft boxes, a couple of speed lights, start playing around. And I think the lighting aspect of photography can make a big difference between something that can be quite ordinary and something that can look very professional. Also too, with the portrait work that I'm doing, if you have a look at, say, the poet portrait or the portrait of the girl in the fetal position, I think the lighting is tremendously important in those to evoke emotions or a feeling of the scene. So to get the right ambience for what you're trying to communicate in those sorts of shots, I think lighting is very important. As a photographer, I'm actually quite old school in the sense that even though I'm using digital equipment, everybody does, I feel very content with just using a Lightroom style of processing program. I don't know how to use Photoshop. I've never wanted to use Photoshop. I don't even want to be tempted that I can actually start moving things around. I think there is a certain amount of discipline about trying to get as much right in camera before you actually hit the computer, so to speak. Because I think if you're a photographer, it's about you being control out there on the street or in the studio. That's where you have control. I think just taking a photo and say, I can sort that out in Photoshop, means that you're not really thinking about what you're trying to do. You're not actually thinking about, you're not trying to think as a photographer, you're thinking in a slightly different way. Because I think a photographer ultimately is trying to capture that moment as we see it. If you were asking me what advice I would give photographers who are fairly new to trying out photography, is I think keep it simple and take one step at a time. And so therefore you might buy a mid-range camera that may not have all the bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, you don't need that. There's a saying that the best camera you've got is the camera you have with you at the time. Extrapolating from that, I would sort of say that, you know, you get a camera and you might get a lens. You learn to use that lens. Don't go and buy a whole range of lenses. Learn to use one lens, then learn the next one. Buy a light, buy one softbox, try one light photography. I think that you have to master each step as you go along. And so don't rush it, enjoy the journey. And it's not about the gear, it's about what you do with it. I think it's an interesting way just to sort of reflect at the end that the one thing about photography is there is a community of photographers out there. I started looking at photographers through buying books. A photographer once said, a great investment, if you want to invest money into photography, go buy other photographers' books and look at them, because seeing stuff printed in the books, the printed image, is something a little bit more powerful than seeing it on screen. And so I think there's that community. Then there's a community of local photographers who can be quite interesting to see what other people are doing and to collaborate with them, swap ideas with them, things like that. I think it's very hard sometimes to work in a vacuum. And then there is the community, the online community, that wonderful online community. There's so many photographers out there. So I don't take photography overtly seriously because so many people are photographers now. I think you just have to settle into where you think you are at that and just be happy where you are, and work towards your own goals, towards what you think is the level of sophistication that you want to get into, and just be happy with what you're producing. Never let other people take you down.
So the editing softwares I use, is Photoshop, and I usually do first of all like a skin retouch, and then just change the color balance. So like adding in more greens or more pinks, and then I go in and I change the blacks of the images. With exposure, I try and get it as close as I can in the original image, but with colour, I love to just like go a bit crazy and like experiment with different like ways of editing, and yeah, I like to make the images really vibrant and like pop quite a lot. I would say start with the curve tool, so in the exposure, and then like usually if you create kind of like an S curve, it kind of like it lowers the like the blacks of the images, and then makes the highlights higher. I think a good photographer is very like subjective, because some people will think like an image looks amazing and then other people would be like, I hate it. So I think a good photographer is someone who's like above photography, is like nice to their like models and subjects, and it's just like personable with like, if they're shooting people, they're like, you know, like interacting with them, making sure they're okay. I think that's a good photographer in terms of like how they are personally, because I think the work is so subjective. I think usually there's like 3 elements going on, like for me, like that's what makes a good photo. If there's like three distinct elements. They could be like three people, or like one person and two props, or like the person and the backdrop and like a light. So it's like three distinct elements in a shot always for me is like really nice. And then if I'm shooting people, I think having a lot of negative space around them is always really nice. But I think where I shoot, mostly it's like quite cramped spaces, so they don't usually have that much negative space around them, because I like to kind of like put lights like really close to people and put like things and get them all like and shoot really close to them. If I'm planning a shoot, like other photographers are always good, but I have loads of magazines, like physical print magazines, so like ID, Dazed, all of those, and I just like have them around my house, and I just kind of like run to them and like look at 3 pages, tear them out, and then go to the like local magazine shop near me and then like just flick through all the books. And then I think just like random like dreams, it sounds really weird, but if you have a dream that's like really vivid, that kind of like helps to see things differently. And then also I think like if I ever like travel or go to new places, even if it's like just a new part of London, like you just see the world a bit more differently, and then like lots of ideas kind of like come naturally to you that way, and you just like see things with a new perspective. So making someone feel comfortable in front of the camera, so yeah, I'd have a chat with them beforehand, kind of like more interested in what they're doing, because I genuinely am like interested in what the people I'm shooting are doing. So yeah, just like ask them about their week, stuff like that, and then I guess just like, yeah, talking to them when I'm setting up, talking to them throughout the shoot. That can definitely make people feel more comfortable. I guess like trying to just, if they are up for like having a laugh, like trying to make them laugh, I guess that's sometimes taking the piss out of myself, which is also fine because like, you know, I'm not like the most like, I don't know, elegant when I'm shooting. It's kind of all like manic and chaotic sometimes. Yeah, so photography is a challenging career. Just in terms of even today, as you saw, like it can be like very emotionally draining. So like after every shoot, well not every shoot, but after like a big shoot or a campaign or something that involves lots of elements and lots of people, I was talking to my friend who's a videographer, and he described it very accurately as like having a shoot hangover. So the next day is like a write-off. I think also knowing when to stop, so like not shooting for so long and just like giving myself time structures is good, because I can get very like carried away and excited about like everything. And then also competitively, you're always having to like be posting stuff on Instagram or submitting to publications or awards, and getting your name out there, because if you sit on the back burner, it's kind of like you kind of get forgotten very easily. So I think just take inspiration from like everything around you, and you can create a photo project out of literally anything, like any idea. So like, I don't know, you could do like different lemonades in like different bars and do like a whole kind of continuous photo project, make a zine out of it, do an exhibition. So there's like everything around you is like an idea to be kind of made into a project. And in terms of like colours as well, just like looking around you, colour palettes, and then also looking up like kind of, yeah, different colour palettes that go together. And then also magazines are really good, because it's nice to see stuff in print that hasn't got like a light kind of shining behind it, kind of like, it's just nice to see something physical. Yeah, so yeah, Instagram's good, but don't get too sucked into it, I'd say.
You know, other people might be critical about your work. That's the first hurdle you have to pass. But on the other hand, seeing it all on the walls, something that was previously just in my head when I was thinking of, how to sequence my work and how to present it, was an absolute epiphany. Like the other day when we were hanging the work up, it's just amazing. And I do actually recommend to anyone, regardless of the level of photography they're at, to print their work. Even if you print it and put it up in your own kitchen, print it as big or as small as you think it needs to be, but print it, put it on the wall and look at it.
I think to be a good photographer, you've got to have an eye for what you're trying to achieve, and you've got to notice the detail, and also you've got to have the technical skills, but the technical skills will only take you so far. You've got to know what that image is going to come out like, how you're going to adjust the lighting or use the lighting. And it's really trying to blend all of those things together to come up with something that is artistically pleasing. I find inspiration in many areas, and again, different types of photography, different inspirations. Landscapes, I love anything to do with water, so waterfalls, seascapes, but also mountains, great cloud formations, maybe taking long exposures to get that movement in the clouds. Those type of things really inspire me. So yeah, being able to travel to interesting places that are not mundane. But on the other hand, you can go into cities where people are in there all the time, but trying to get a different take on that, trying to look at some details, whether it's in a city like Bath or in London. There's a lot to be seen there that people don't notice unless you look really closely. You have to get inspiration and ideas from other people. There's nothing's ever new. It's really seeing what you like and thinking, well, how could I do that? And yeah, if I'm looking through images and think, oh, I really wish I'd taken that, then I might start thinking, okay, how am I going to do something that's better than that, or as good as that, or just inspired from that. Working with models is very different if you're working with a very experienced model compared to working with a new model. And I do work with quite a few new models who are just coming into the business, and we do collaborations where they're gaining experience. I'm also just gaining experience with working with different models. Trying to really break the ice and to make the model feel comfortable, relaxed, confident are the key things here. That really brings out the image. If the model is not feeling at all comfortable, then the images are going to show that. You really have to inspire the model to relax, and it can be many things. It can be getting the right music going, or just really setting the whole atmosphere as being, one of friendship, collaboration, etc. Well, a camera was a great help. Personally, I use the Sony, but there's a wide variety of cameras you could take. Obviously, the Canon and Nikons have been very popular over the years. In their SLRs, they've moved on to mirrorless, which is where the industry is kind of going. A lot of advantages with it. I think the key thing with any camera system you're going to use are the lenses. Having a good set of lenses is probably more important than the choice of body, unless you're after something specific for sports photography or something where you need 20 frames per second to capture that exact moment. Any of the SLRs or mirrorless cameras these days will be able to take a great picture. I think the lens is often the limiting factor, so choose good glass and match it to the best body that fits your pocket, really. I'd say the lens that I use most is this one here, which is the Sony 24-70 GM. It's just a kind of workhorse lens, really. It does the wide angle, or the 24mm end and 70 end. It's great for studio work, for the size of studio that I have there. It's great for just generally walking around. For more specialized things, I'd use something such as this is a Samyang 85mm 1.4, and this is absolutely wonderful for portraits or for anything where you really want to get a really soft bokeh in the background. So that's probably my go-to lens for portraits or outdoor models in landscapes, because it does give a really nice effect. And then this one is it's a manual lens. It's a Laowa, not a particularly expensive lens, but it's a great, very wide angle. So this is 15mm, and it's f2. So it's great for, I tend to use it for things like landscapes or astro landscapes where you've got, say, the Milky Way in the background and the foreground. It gives a really good field of view for that. I prefer natural lighting, but sometimes you can't do that. So I think learning how to use studio lighting or augmenting natural lighting with outdoor flash, I think, is something well worth learning. If we just look at the outdoor natural light photography, the sun might be behind the model. Let's say we're shooting a model on a beach at sunset. The sun's going to be behind, so you're going to end up with a silhouette. So you could use reflectors, but generally then you need somebody else to hold the reflectors. So having an outdoor battery-operated lighting system can provide that fill there and really make the image, make it work. So for everything apart from astrophotography, I shoot in RAW. So I use Adobe Camera Raw as part of the Photoshop suite, and I use that to do the basic lighting adjustment. So you're adjusting the highlights and the lowlights and color balance and things like that. And then for selected photos, probably not all of them, I'll then go into Photoshop, and if it's, let's say it's a model shoot, might remove some of those little blemishes that show up on the skin, try and tone down any highlights or something that have gone a bit over the top, or bring out some of the shadows, and use that lightly, I would say. What I don't like doing is doing anything like dropping in a new sky or cutting out a model and putting it into a completely different landscape. I like it to be more authentic. Okay, so in terms of tips for photographers, I would say there's two aspects to that. Firstly is really get to know your camera, get to know what the capabilities of the camera are, what features it's got, and how to find those features quickly, and maybe set up different memory settings. For instance, this camera's got 3 different memory settings, so I have one set for studio, one set for landscape, and one set for something else, which I don't remember what it is. But those are my sort of go-to basic setups, then I adjust from there. So really learning your equipment is key. In terms of deciding what to shoot and how to shoot it, it's really, firstly, well, in terms of subject matter, that's for everybody to choose. There's a million things you can shoot out there. But in terms of how to shoot it, just think about the light. Where is the light coming from? Is it harsh light? Is it nice soft light? Can I use the building across the road as a reflector? It's really a matter of controlling the light. Photography is now ubiquitous. Everybody's got their smartphone. There are billions of images being taken every day. Most of them get looked at for half a second on one of the social media platforms and are more or less throwaway. But enough images are of a high enough quality to become significant. There'll be ones that people will come back to. Maybe that's a matter of it gets 1,000 shares or something like that, or it goes up on the wall in your home or in a museum. So, you know, art and photography means different things to different people. For me, getting an image that is I-class is good enough to put up on my wall is a result for me. If other people like it and want to buy it off my Etsy site, then so much the better. One bit of advice I'd give to anybody who's interested in photography is to get out there and do it. Get involved in the photography, get involved in the social scene, meet other photographers, models, or makeup artists, that type of thing. Really, the social scene is as much fun as the actual photography. And if I hadn't got into photography there, I wouldn't have met my lovely wife.